My brother framed me at work to steal my promotion. Then my new board chair fired him publicly. I still remember the exact moment my world collapsed. I was sitting in the conference room, hands folded on the polished oak table, waiting for what I thought would be a routine meeting. Then Mark walked in, my younger brother, my supposed ally, carrying a thick folder. His face was serious, almost apologetic, but something in his eyes felt off. Cold. The board members filed in, their expressions grim. My stomach tightened. Mark opened the folder and began speaking. He talked about negligence, poor judgment, $1 million client loss. Every word he spoke pointed directly at me. I sat frozen, watching him lay out evidence that painted me as careless and outdated. The room felt smaller with each accusation. When he finished, the board chair looked at me with disappointment. "We expected better from you, Frank," he said quietly. My promotion, 25 years of loyalty condensed into one moment, vanished. Mark was commended for his honesty. As everyone left, Mark leaned close and whispered, "You should have retired when you had the chance." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. The next morning, I returned to my cubicle in a daze. Coworkers who used to greet me cheerfully now looked away. Some whispered behind their hands. The air felt thick with judgment. Mark's new corner office gleamed at the end of the hallway like a trophy he'd stolen. I couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. Around noon, HR called me in. A stern woman named Patricia slid a packet across her desk. "Effective immediately, you're being reassigned to the distribution branch," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Just until things cool off." Cool off. My reputation was shattered. I drove home that evening in complete silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. At every red light, I replayed the meeting in my mind. Mark's voice, the board's cold stares, the humiliation. But then, something nagged at me, a tiny detail in one of the reports Mark had shown. A timestamp. It didn't match. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing with questions. By 3 a.m, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I started going through my old emails, searching for anything that might explain what happened. That's when I found them. Messages sent under my name that I never wrote. Approvals I never gave. Decisions I never made. My heart pounded as I checked the timestamps. Saturday nights. Every single one. But I spent my Saturday nights caring for my mother, who had dementia. I was never at my computer. Someone had used my login credentials. I dug deeper, accessing the company's server through my credentials. My hands shook as I navigated through folders. Then I saw it. My project files had been accessed multiple times over the past 6 months. The IP address? It traced back to Mark's computer. My own brother had logged in as me, altered my work, and framed me for his mistakes. The betrayal burned worse than the humiliation. I saved everything to a USB drive and labeled it simply, Truth. The next day, I cornered Mark in the parking garage after work. He was whistling, swinging his car keys like he didn't have a care in the world. When he saw me approaching, his smile faltered. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady. Mark shrugged, leaning against his car. "About what?" I told him what I'd found, the emails, the timestamps, the IP logs. His expression didn't change. Instead, he laughed. "You're getting paranoid, old man," he said, shaking his head. "Maybe the stress is getting to you. You should take some time off." His tone was mocking, dismissive. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Face it, Frank. The company needs fresh leadership. You had your time." I wanted to punch him. Instead, I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, I heard him talking to someone on his phone. "I had to put the old dog down before he embarrassed us all," he said, laughing. I sat in my car, shaking with rage. But I didn't explode. I decided to stay quiet. For now. The transfer to the distribution branch was humiliating. It was a smaller facility on the edge of town, away from headquarters, away from everything I'd built. My new desk was half the size of my old one, squeezed between filing cabinets in a cramped office. The work was simple, managing shipping schedules, tracking inventory. It felt like a punishment. My coworkers were polite but distant. They'd heard the rumors. Everyone had. I could see it in their eyes. They thought I'd messed up. But I accepted the demotion without complaint. I had a plan now. Quitting would only make me look guilty. Staying meant I could rebuild slowly, carefully. One afternoon, a young woman from IT named Tina approached my desk. She had nervous eyes and kept glancing over her shoulder. "Mr. Dalton," she said quietly, I saw something weird in the file logs around the time you were accused. I thought you should know. My heart raced. What did you see? She hesitated, then whispered. Someone accessed your files from a different computer. Multiple times. I thanked her and watched her hurry away. Hope flickered inside me. Tina agreed to help me, but only after hours when no one else was around. We met in the back server room, a cold, humming space filled with blinking lights. She pulled up the backup logs on her screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Here, she said, pointing. These files were edited under your credentials, but the metadata shows they came from a different machine. She clicked through folders, revealing timestamps, IP addresses, digital fingerprints. Everything pointed to Mark's computer. It was all there, proof that he'd manipulated my work to make me look incompetent. Can I use this? I asked. Tina bit her lip. Not officially. If anyone finds out I pulled these logs without authorization, I could lose my job. I understood. We were both taking a risk. I transferred the files to a private external drive, careful to leave no trace. Thank you, I told her. She nodded, her eyes filled with worry. Just be careful, Mr. Dalton. I left that night with the evidence tucked safely in my bag. I labeled the folder on my drive simply, Truth. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I would be. That Sunday, my mother insisted on hosting a family dinner. I didn't want to go, but refusing would raise questions. When I arrived, Mark was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place. He wore an expensive suit, new, probably bought with his promotion bonus. My mother beamed at him, patting his hand. Mark's doing so well at the company, she said proudly. He even helped clean up a big mess recently. Mark smiled humbly, glancing at me. Just doing my job, Mom. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate while Mark spun stories about his success. He didn't mention my name, but every word felt like a dig. After dinner, as everyone was leaving, Mark pulled me aside in the hallway. His friendly mask dropped. You had your chance, Frank, he said coldly. Stay out of my way, or things will get worse. I met his gaze without flinching. We'll see, I said quietly. He smirked and walked away. I drove home that night with a strange sense of calm. I knew exactly what I had to do. At the distribution branch, I threw myself into my work. I volunteered for extra projects, stayed late, came in early. Slowly, people began to notice. My manager, a straightforward man named Carl, started assigning me bigger tasks. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Dalton, he said one afternoon. A few weeks later, Carl called me into his office. The regional director is launching a pilot program, he explained. She's looking for someone reliable to lead the branch's portion. I recommended you. My heart lifted for the first time in months. Who's the director? I asked. Her name's Evelyn Shore. New to the company, brought in as a consultant. She's tough but fair. The following Monday, Evelyn introduced herself via video call. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense tone. I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Dalton, she said, studying me through the screen. Let's see what's true. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. But inside, I felt a spark of hope. This was my chance to prove myself again. Maybe even more. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Evelyn on the pilot program. It involved streamlining our distribution process and cutting costs without sacrificing quality. I poured everything into it, every lesson from my 25 years of experience. Evelyn noticed. During a coffee break, she asked me a direct question. Why is someone with your skills working in a branch office? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Let's just say I trusted the wrong person, I said. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press. I've seen that before, she said quietly. Politics can be vicious. We worked well together. She valued my input, asked for my opinions, and listened when I spoke. It felt good to be respected again. One day, she mentioned something offhand. She'd been hired by the company's board to evaluate operations across all departments. There's been some concern about internal politics, she said. I'm here to clean things up. I felt a surge of hope. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was her. I just had to be patient. Back at headquarters, cracks were starting to show in Mark's empire. I heard the rumors through Tina, who kept me updated. Mark's department was over budget. Deadlines were being missed. Clients were complaining about sloppy work and poor communication. Mark's arrogance was catching up with him. He'd been so focused on stealing my position that he forgot to actually do the work. One evening, Tina forwarded me an email by mistake. It was meant for someone in accounting. The subject line read, "Unauthorized bonus requests." Inside, Mark had requested extra payments for 2 contractors who didn't exist. He was padding his budget and pocketing the difference. I saved the email immediately. It was more ammunition, but I didn't act yet. I needed the right moment, the right audience. Evelyn was building her case for the board. If I moved too soon, Mark could cover his tracks. So I waited, watching, documenting, preparing. Mark thought he'd buried me. He had no idea I was digging my way back up, one piece of evidence at a time. And soon, he'd be the one buried. 2 months into the pilot program, Evelyn invited me to present our findings to the board. My stomach dropped. "The same board that demoted me?" I asked. She nodded. "Your work should speak louder than the whispers, Frank." I wanted to refuse, but I knew this was my shot. I spent a week preparing a detailed presentation, charts, data, projections. Everything was airtight. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept imagining walking into that room again, facing the same people who'd judged me so harshly. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully and drove to headquarters. My hands were steady, but my heart raced. When I arrived, I checked the attendee list. My stomach lurched. Mark's name was on it. Of course he'd be there. He probably wanted to watch me fail again. But this time, I wasn't walking in defenseless. I had Evelyn's support. I had my work. And I had the truth waiting in the wings. I took a deep breath and walked into the building. This was it. Walking through headquarters felt surreal. People stared. Some whispered. A few looked away quickly, embarrassed. I kept my head high and walked straight to the conference room. Mark was already there, sitting near the front. When he saw me, his face went pale. He hadn't expected this. I took my seat beside Evelyn, who gave me an encouraging nod. The board chair called the meeting to order, and Evelyn introduced me. "Frank Dalton has led our pilot program with exceptional results," she said clearly. "I'd like him to present his findings." I stood, clicked through my presentation, and spoke with calm confidence. I showed how we'd cut costs by 18% while improving delivery times. I explained the logistics behind it, answered questions thoroughly, and stayed professional throughout. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the board chair nodded. "Impressive work, Mr. Dalton." Evelyn smiled. "This is the kind of leadership we should have recognized long ago." I glanced at Mark. His jaw was clenched, his face red. He looked furious. As we filed out, he cornered me in the hallway. "Don't get comfortable," he hissed. I met his eyes calmly. "We'll see." That evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. The presentation had gone well. The board had seen my value again. But I knew Mark wouldn't let this go quietly. Sure enough, later that night, Tina sent me a screenshot of an email. Mark had written to one of his staff. "Find out what Dalton's digging into. I want to know everything." I smiled grimly. Mark was scared. He could feel his control slipping. Good. Let him panic. Let him make mistakes. Over the next week, I noticed small things. People watching me more closely, questions about my work at the branch, IT logs showing someone had tried to access my files again. Mark was desperate to find leverage. But he wouldn't find anything. I'd been careful. Meanwhile, Evelyn approached me with a new project. "I'm conducting an internal review," she said. "Efficiency evaluation across all departments. I want you to help." I knew exactly what she meant. This was bigger than my redemption. This was about cleaning house. "I'm in," I said. Evelyn's smile was sharp. "Good. Let's see what the truth looks like on paper." Tina came to me one evening, looking more nervous than usual. "Someone's been trying to delete old server logs," she said quietly. "The same ones I showed you before." My chest tightened. "Can you stop them?" She shook her head. "Not without raising suspicion. But I can monitor who's doing it." I thought for a moment, then made a decision. "Don't stop them," I said. "Just watch. Document everything." Tina's eyes widened. "You want them to delete evidence?" I nodded. "If someone's trying to erase their tracks, that's evidence in itself. Let them dig their own grave." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll keep a log of every attempt." Over the next few days, the deletion attempts continued. Each one was traced back to Mark's login credentials. He was panicking, trying to cover up what he'd done. But every move he made was being recorded. I didn't tell him. I didn't confront him. I just waited. The noose was tightening around his neck, and he was the one pulling it closed. Soon, there'd be no way out. Evelyn launched the internal review officially, calling it an efficiency evaluation. Every department had to submit their past reports, financial records, and project files for auditing. It was framed as routine, but I knew better. This was a trap, and Mark walked right into it. At first, he tried to look cooperative. He submitted files quickly, smiled at Evelyn in meetings, and acted like he had nothing to hide. But behind the scenes, he was scrambling. I heard through Tina that he'd been working late every night, combing through old reports, trying to find anything incriminating. The problem? He couldn't erase everything. Too many people had copies. Too many records existed outside his control. As Evelyn and I reviewed the submissions, discrepancies started piling up. False approvals, altered reports, inflated budget numbers. All of it tied back to Mark's department. Evelyn noticed immediately. "These numbers don't add up," she said, tapping her pen on the table. "Would you say this looks like fraud?" I met her gaze. "I would." She nodded slowly. Then we dig deeper. The investigation was officially underway. The deeper we dug, the messier it got. Mark had been manipulating records for over a year, long before he framed me. He'd inflated project costs, paid phantom contractors, and skimmed money off budgets. My framing was just one piece of his scheme. He needed me out of the way because I would have noticed the discrepancies. Evelyn called in an external auditor to verify everything. Within a week, the auditor confirmed what we already knew. Mark had committed fraud on a significant scale. The evidence was overwhelming. But the final piece came from Tina. Late one night, she sent me a folder labeled Original Reports. Inside was the unaltered version of the report Mark had used to frame me, complete with his digital signature embedded in the metadata. He'd edited my work, made it look like I'd approved the bad shipment, and presented it as fact. It was all there. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every betrayal. I stared at the screen, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. This was it. The truth, undeniable and complete. I forwarded everything to Evelyn with a simple message. "Ready when you are." Evelyn ordered a full audit of Mark's department. The announcement sent shockwaves through the office. Mark tried to act calm, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He started blaming his staff, claiming they'd made mistakes without his knowledge. He threw people under the bus left and right, trying to save himself. But it didn't work. Every trail led back to him. His signature. His approvals. His computer. There was no escape. I watched from a distance as his world unraveled. Co-workers who once admired him now avoided him. The corner office that used to shine with success now felt like a prison. One afternoon, I passed him in the hallway. He looked terrible, pale, hollow-eyed, defeated. He didn't say anything, just stared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just kept walking. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And justice was finally coming. The board scheduled an emergency meeting for the following week. Evelyn told me to be ready. "Tomorrow," she said, "I need you to tell your story." I nodded. I'd been ready for months. The night before the board meeting, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few months. The humiliation, the whispers, the betrayal, the long, quiet nights spent rebuilding my reputation piece by piece. I thought about Mark, my own brother, and how he'd looked me in the eye while destroying my life. I thought about my mother, who still believed he was a hero. I thought about all the people at the company who'd judged me without knowing the truth. Tomorrow they'd know. Tomorrow, everything would come out. Part of me felt anxious. What if the board didn't believe me? What if they sided with Mark again? But then I remembered the evidence. The timestamps. The logs. The reports. The truth was undeniable. I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I reviewed the files one more time, just to be sure. Everything was in order. Everything was ready. At midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Evelyn. "Be ready, Frank. Tomorrow, I need you to tell your story." I replied simply, "I will." Then I closed my eyes and finally slept. The boardroom was packed. Every seat was filled, and a few people stood along the back wall. I recognized most of the faces, executives, department heads, senior staff. And there, near the front, sat Mark. He looked composed, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The board chair called the meeting to order. Evelyn stood and addressed the room. "We've completed our audit," she said, her voice clear and steady. "The findings are serious. Before we proceed, I'd like Mr. Frank Dalton to provide context." All eyes turned to me. My heart pounded, but I stood calmly. I opened the folder I'd labeled Truth months ago and began. I explained how I'd been framed, how emails were sent under my name from Mark's computer, how files were altered on weekends when I was caring for my mother, how the evidence used to destroy my reputation had been fabricated. I spoke without anger, without theatrics. Just facts. Timestamps. IP logs. Digital signatures. I showed the unaltered reports. I showed Mark's fraudulent bonus requests. I showed everything. The room was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. And when I finished, I sat down. Evelyn stood again. Mr. Dalton's findings have been verified by an independent auditor, she said. Every claim is accurate. One of the board members leaned forward, his face pale. Are you saying Mark Dalton framed his own brother? Evelyn nodded. Yes. And that's not all. Mark also committed fraud by creating fake contractors, inflating budgets, and embezzling company funds. The total damage exceeds $200,000. A murmur rippled through the room. Mark shot to his feet, his face red. This is ridiculous, he shouted. Frank's just bitter because he couldn't keep up. He's twisting everything to make me look bad. Evelyn's voice cut through his protest like ice. The evidence speaks for itself, Mr. Dalton. Your digital fingerprints are on every falsified document. She turned to the board chair. I recommend immediate termination and referral to law enforcement. The board chair nodded grimly. Agreed. Mark's face went white. You can't do this, he stammered. I built this department. I saved this company from his incompetence. No one responded. The room stayed silent, watching him unravel. Security entered quietly, standing by the door. The board chair looked at Mark with cold finality. Mark Dalton, you are terminated effective immediately. Please leave the premises. Mark stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find words. Then his eyes found mine. For a moment, I saw real fear. He realized this was the same room where he'd humiliated me. The same table. The same witnesses. Poetic justice. This is your fault, he hissed at me, his voice shaking. You couldn't just let it go. I met his gaze calmly. You taught me betrayal, Mark. I just taught you truth. Security stepped forward. Sir, please come with us. Mark's shoulders slumped. He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the door, his confident stride replaced by a defeated shuffle. As he passed me, he muttered, I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the room exhaled collectively. Evelyn turned to me, her expression warm. Thank you, Frank. You've done this company a great service. The board chair stood. Mr. Dalton, we owe you an apology. Your integrity was questioned unfairly. We'd like to discuss restoring your position, and more. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. It was over. Finally, it was over. Word spread through the company like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone knew Mark had been fired for fraud and framing his own brother. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from coworkers, some apologizing, some congratulating, some just shocked. HR quietly processed my reinstatement, restoring my seniority and back pay. They even cleared my record entirely. It was as if the demotion had never happened. Mark's office was emptied by noon. I walked past it once and saw the bare desk, the empty shelves. It felt surreal. Just months ago, that office had symbolized everything he'd stolen from me. Now it was just an empty room. Later that afternoon, Evelyn called me into her office. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Sit, Frank. I sat, curious. She folded her hands and looked at me seriously. The board and I have been discussing your future here. Your work on the pilot program was exceptional. Your integrity is beyond question. We'd like to offer you a position as Vice President of Operations. I blinked, stunned. Vice President? She smiled. You've earned it. What do you say? I thought of everything I'd been through. The humiliation. The rebuild. The fight for truth. And now vindication. I accept, I said. The following Monday, I walked through headquarters as the newly appointed Vice President of Operations. The same hallways that once whispered about my failure now buzzed with respect. People nodded as I passed. Some stopped to shake my hand. My old team, the one I'd managed before the demotion, clapped when I entered their department. Welcome back, boss, one of them said, grinning. I spent the day meeting with department heads, reviewing operations, and setting new goals. It felt good to be back. Better than good. It felt right. Late in the afternoon, as I was reviewing reports in my new office, something slid under my door. I picked it up. It was a handwritten note on plain paper. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Mark. I stared at it for a long moment, then folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. Mark's regret didn't undo what he'd done. It didn't erase the pain or the betrayal. But it was something. A small acknowledgement of the destruction he'd caused. I wouldn't respond. There was nothing to say. I'd moved on. He'd have to do the same. Alone. A week later, Mark texted me asking to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop across town, far from the office. Mark looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by hollow exhaustion. He slid into the booth across from me, hands wrapped around a paper cup. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. I nodded but didn't speak. He cleared his throat. "I messed up, Frank. I know that. I got greedy. I got desperate. I wanted to prove I could be better than you." His voice cracked. I didn't think it would destroy everything. I studied him, feeling a complicated mix of pity and anger. "You didn't just take my promotion, Mark," I said evenly. "You took my peace. You made me doubt myself. You turned our family against me." He looked down. "I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it," I replied. "You'll have to earn your way back. The hard way. Just like I did." He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about it. "Honestly. Maybe someday," I said. "But not today." I stood and walked out, leaving him alone with his regrets. 2 months later, the company held its annual gathering. It was a celebration of the year's successes, and this year, there was a lot to celebrate. Efficiency was up. Costs were down. Morale had improved significantly under the new leadership. Evelyn stood at the podium and addressed the room. "This year, we faced challenges, but we also reaffirmed our commitment to integrity. I want to thank Frank Dalton publicly for restoring that integrity and reminding us all what true leadership looks like." The room erupted in applause. I stood and gave a brief, humble speech about honesty, perseverance, and doing the right thing even when it's hard. As I spoke, I glanced toward the back of the room. Through the glass doors, I saw a figure standing outside. Mark. He was watching from a distance, his face pressed against the window. Watching the applause that used to be his. Watching the respect he'd thrown away. I turned back to the crowd, smiling quietly. I didn't feel triumph or bitterness. Just peace. Justice had been served. My dignity had been restored. And I'd learned that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds its way to the light.